Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here at Star Cottage Studio in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. So yeah, it's been a pretty busy day. I had some meetings earlier, so that's always fun. Um, it actually was fun. I don't mean to make that sound sarcastic, but it was fun. There was a fun meeting with an artist who's talking about their process and some different things about their business. And that's always exciting to me to hear about fellow creative entrepreneurs, which I enjoy. Being that we are creative entrepreneurs ourselves. So I always think it's interesting to see how other people do it so that if we're doing something right, it's a confirmation. And if we're doing something wrong, it's something we can tweak and hopefully change. So that was nice. Yeah, so this is one of the first times I've been back to the cottage since I was away on my trip. So there's a little bit of organization that I have to do before I can really get going. I'm on this mission to clean and get everything ready. So I have a feeling that we're going to do a photo shoot soon. I don't know what it's about, but I just have this intuition that it's going to happen. So I want to make sure that this area is as clean as I can get it. Anyways, so if you're watching, say hello and maybe where you're tuning in from. It's always nice to hear. I see June's watching. Hi, June. Anita's watching. Hi, Anita. Marianne's watching. Hi, Marianne. Yeah. So yesterday we had talked about different ideas for tutorials, and this is actually something that we may have done a couple weeks ago. And one person said that they would like to see how to make the head pins. So I said, okay, well, I can do that. And at the time we were down to one car, so it made it a little bit tricksy playing musical chairs with the car. But now we have two, so I can come and go as I please without having to be like, oh, are you going to be available between this and this time? And if so, do you need the car? And do the cats have food? And who's going to feed the cats? And this, that, and the other thing. So anyway, so now we're here at the studio and we can do this tutorial. I've done it before, but it's always nice to do it again. I mean, it's something that if you didn't watch it the first time, you may not necessarily know that I do this kind of work, especially since I've been doing a lot of seed bead work and we have some new people joining in. So they may not know that I do this kind of work. So, anyways, I see a couple more people have tuned in. Norma's watching. Hey, Norma. Cheryl's watching. Hey, Cheryl. Yeah. So, if you did not see the tutorial on our YouTube channel, Jen, she does a tutorial every Saturday morning. And yeah, it was a pretty good one. It was like a twisty spiral. I saw a couple people do it. And so that was always nice. Barbara says, "Hey everyone, feeling the need to connect with creatives this week because it's been a week with bad pop-ups and the struggle." Oh, I'm sorry to hear that it wasn't a good week. Hopefully we can boost you up and send that good energy your way. Excuse me. Susie's watching. Hey Susie. Um, all right, so if you didn't see that tutorial, check it out. We are also doing a Christmas and July sale. So if you want to save on your online order, this is for online only, you can save, I think, 25% using Xmas in July. I'll have to double check that. If William is watching and can drop the coupon code in the comments, then I'll share it because I don't remember it off the top of my head exactly. And that's one of those things. If you're on our newsletter, if you go to our website, there'll be a prompt that asks you to join our newsletter. And if you join that newsletter, you'll have an email with all the coupon code information. And then you can just copy and paste or click it directly and it will go to the shop. That's super easy breezy. And then I don't have to be like, anyway, so there's that. And what did we do on Monday? We did William showed some gemstones and crystals. If you want, you can watch that. The promotional period for the additional discount, unfortunately, is over. However, they're all still really good prices as far as what they are. So, even if you miss the sale, you'll still get a pretty good deal. We always try to keep things affordable for our people. I know there are some folks who they're going to try to get as much as they can out of folks. And for me, I kind of feel weird about that. So I try to always offer the best prices when I can. And William feels that way as well. So anyways. We have a sale going on in our online store. So if you haven't had a chance, please do take advantage of that. It's always nice. I know some people, they kind of wait until we do sales, and that's always unpredictable because you never know when we're going to do one. So we're doing one right now, and it goes through the 25th. So you have a little bit of time still yet to enjoy that. So on Monday, we did the gemstones and the crystals on our live. And then last night what did we do last night? We did some brick stitch off of a form. So so we did brick stitch off of a form with some fringe. I hope you like it. It's kind of one that we redid. I can't remember why we did that, but we made a little kit together for that. And while I was cleaning, I found some extras and I was like, why aren't we selling these? So I have those all set aside in William's desk. And so if you're interested in using those components, please do. Those are available in our online store. If you search Raven, it should pop right up. It also, I think he moved it closer to the top. And then I also I found the samples for the ginkgo leaf earring kit. Those, at some point we did a live showing those ginkgo leaf earrings, and people seemed really excited about them. But for whatever reason, we did not actually put them online. So we did a live tutorial on how to use those, how to texture them, how to pop holes in them. And then we didn't actually put them online. So they're online now. There's only a limited amount of them, and I'm not making more. And the reason why is the way that we cut those ginkgo leaves out. You have to use a very thick kind of gauge metal so that there's enough material so that it pops. If you use the thin metal like what I did, there's a lot of cleanup. But if you're making big earrings, you need them to be relatively light. So I used, I think 24 gauge copper for the blanks, and they're annealed. They come annealed, so you don't have to anneal them yourself. They come pre-annealed. I hope William was able to put annealed copper, because the surface is kind of a little bit, it's not dingy. It's just when you heat the copper up and you put it in the pickle, it removes any kind of like oils or anything that keeps it nice and shiny. And so it's kind of a matte finish. And so when people get those, they're getting an annealed copper piece. And the annealed copper looks that way. If we shine it up, we're actually work hardening it to some degree. And it doesn't really make sense. So just keep that in mind. If you order it and you get it and you're like, ooh, these look kind of gnarly, that's why. So don't get Don't start clutching them pearls because, that's the way it comes. So um, if we add more steps to it, the price goes up also. So yeah, so just keep that in mind. If you got some, they're going to be a little bit subject to the elements. And what I mean by that is copper, uh, when it's exposed to different things like the air and water, it can develop a patina, which is a chemical reaction between the surface of the metal and the environment around it. And so when you peel away all of the oils and things like that, it exposes the copper in its most like raw state to the environment around it. So just keep that in mind. I see Sweet Pea Gemstones is watching. Hey, Sandra. Cheryl says my AG box delivered today. It was definitely like Christmas morning. I love everything. Thank you. Oh, awesome. So good, good. I always like to hear it when people are pleased with their orders. We always try to, one of the things that I particularly like to do is I like to focus on delight when we're picking things for the store. And so, whether that is like a kit or something like a new product, I always try to focus on what would make me happy and feel that sense of delight. So it is always nice to hear when people have a good experience because that's what we were hoping for. I see a couple more people are watching. Harry is watching. Hey, Harry. Um, yeah. So those ginkgo leaf earring kits were debuted last night. There's a limited number of them, and the annealed copper ginkgo leaves are there. They do not come with a hole or holes, so just keep that in mind. If you don't have those tools to create the holes or a hammer or texture, the metal, there are affiliate links for some of those things in the product description. That way, I know sometimes people are like, oh, well, I don't want to buy from Amazon if I can buy it from you, which we definitely appreciate. And we can, if you are not in a hurry, we can sometimes accommodate you by getting stuff. It just takes longer. So just keep that in mind because we are a small business and we are a smaller kind of outfit. So we don't have like 100 bench blocks on the way on like waiting in the wings. We have like 4. And if those 4 sell out, then we have to order it and then it takes a while for it to come. And then that's how we do some of the things. We always try to keep our inventory dialed in so that there isn't any too many additional waits for folks who are trying to get their orders. So anyways, just keep that in mind. That's available if you are interested. I know a couple people said they were. Someone asked if we were going to separate out the earring or the ginkgo blanks from the kit, and unfortunately we're not at this time. And that's because we only made so many number of kits, and if we start separating out, we just have to make more, and I'm not going to do it because it takes a long time. I have got other stuff to do, and I hate to sound like that, but it takes a long time to grind off all the edges and file things and cut things and saw things and do all that. So I made enough for 8 kits, and that's what I made. If you want it thicker, if you want it on like 18 gauge, 20 gauge maybe, we might be able to hook you up, but that's a maybe situation. And if you are willing to wait for me to make it, that's at info@allegorygallery.com is where you would put your request in. All right. So what else is going on? So yesterday we went over the brick stitch and we did a catch up. I showed the piece that I made in my workshop at the Baltimore Jewelry Center. You see my new t-shirt? I like it. I always try to get, I never used to do this and now I regret it, but wherever I go, I try to get a t-shirt as like a souvenir. And, um, I never used to do that. And then now I'm like, I should do that. So I started doing that. So it's kind of like a Pokemon collect them all situation. Anyways, so today we're going to make some head pins. The first thing that we're going to do is talk about safety. With seed beading and stuff, you don't have that much to worry about with safety. But with anything hot with the open flame, we do want to talk about safety. So if you are feeling like Stevie Nicks today and you've got your bell sleeves on and your long flowing hair, tie your hair up and either put a rubber band on your sleeves so that your beautiful silk shirt doesn't catch a flame, or switch to short sleeves or something where the sleeves aren't billowing into the fire. You know, I know that most of you are very competent and capable adults, and I hope I have not come across as though I'm patronizing you all, but I do want to stress the importance of certain things so that when you go off on your own, you're set up for success and that you're going to stay whole, healthy, and you're not going to put yourself in danger. So that's why I'm going over this. You can take what you will from it, what you do in your own home. That's up to you. I'm not going to be there being all like, no, don't do this. So, it's up to you what you do. All right. You're assuming all grown-ups watching. So just keep that in mind. I don't want y'all catch on fire and then catch your house on fire. And then they're like, oh, I watched this YouTube tutorial and then now I don't have a house. So, yeah, that we're going to try to avoid that. Barbara says, I bought a collection of Peter pieces from a friend in the mixed media world, and it is something I'm sort of stressed out about beginning that project. Oh, well, hopefully, you'll enjoy it and can have fun with it. Bonnie says, I appreciate your input on safety. Michelle's watching. Hey, Michelle. And Barbara says, no one wants their wig on fire. Correct. So just keep in mind, most of it is common sense, but I'm always surprised what seems like common sense and then what other people think is common sense. So one thing that we're going to do is if you have flip-flops on, maybe swap those out for closed-toed shoes. The fire or ball, like the molten metal, can run down and hit you on your legs if you're not careful. So just keep that in mind. We've got some preventative measures set up here at the studio so that doesn't happen, and I'll go over that in a second. So one thing that I'm going to suggest you do is put on an apron. I need to ask William about maybe doing some dye sublimation with some aprons. So, because I love a good apron. But so we're going to put an apron, and what that's going to do is prevent us. It's going to be another layer that prevents it from anything hot hitting us directly onto our flesh or through that very thin layer of t-shirt material or whatever. Somebody who's like, oh, they're trying to do this like sexy time calendar where they have these like big brawny dudes wearing like, I don't know, like a thong basically, doing metalsmith. And I was like, not for me. That's how you get unintentionally hurt in some areas, and then you'll be scarred for life. So anyways, the other thing to consider is your ventilation system. This is something that is it's not super bad because we're working in short little bursts and we can open windows and open a door. I've got the door open and letting some fresh air in, and that's pretty good. It also depends on the metal that you're using. For copper and silver, you don't really have to think about it too much. But if you're using bronze, it's always good to see what the alloy is for your bronze. And the reason why is that sometimes when they mix bronze and they mix brass up, they'll put zinc in it. And when zinc is heated, it's super bad for you. So if you are using and doing bronze, it's always good to put a mask on or a respirator. And that's just another thing that will keep you making for longer. Now, if you don't care about that, then that's up to you. But if you're in a shared space and your neighbor maybe want to have kids later on or something, make sure that you are cognitive of the people around you as well. Because you may make a decision for yourself and your own health and safety, but if you are in an area where there are other people around you, you don't want to take that choice away from them. All right. So just be courteous to your neighbors if you're working in a space with other people around you. So we're going to put on our aprons, and then we're also going to put on some glasses. Now, these are just cheapy safety glasses. The safety glasses, they're like $3. You can look for PPE, and you can get that. If you want to use a face shield, you can use a face shield. I just these are like my eyes are one of my most important tools that I use. So it's as an artist, that's my most important tools are my eyes and my hands. So anything that can put either one of those at risk, I'm very cautious about because I don't want to say have hot metal flick in my eye and then I am no longer able to do what I do. I'm sure that there's some kind of workaround in this world, but yes. So there's a couple comments. Marion says, of course, these are not, I have to take this off so that I can actually see. This says, that's because sense isn't common enough. See some of the warning messages on things. I think also people have to do that for liabilities now, because I was researching why there are such dumb warnings on them. And for like I got a cup and it said, or coffee at some place. I can't remember where I got the coffee. And it says, extremely hot, be careful. Extreme danger of burning your crotch or whatever it was. And the reason why I looked it up is because somebody had accidentally hurt themselves. And if they don't put that there, then it opens them up to litigation. So, they're just trying to protect themselves. And then sometimes people do silly things like eating Tide Pods and stuff. It's like, do you think that would taste good? I mean, it looks kind of like it could be appealing, but just get something like a bag of like Sour Patch Kids or something and chow down on those. But eating soap, like when I was a kid, we try to avoid getting our mouths washed out with soap. So, yeah. Anyways. Barbara said, just need to release the carbon dioxide. Zinc is not good. Yeah. So when you're working with different metals, it's always good to kind of be aware of what's in them. I think that's good just in general. Like when people are working with sterling silver, there is other stuff in that silver. It's unless you're working with fine silver, there's other things in your sterling silver. And for example, there's copper. And the reason why they do that is to make it stronger. But it can also cause different things to happen in your metal in the future. So just keep that in mind. I always think it's good. It's better to know than not know. Now, before I get into it and my hands get kind of busy, I did want to say that if you are in the market for a torch, we do sell the torches online. Excuse me, that's allegorygallery.com. So if you want a torch and you don't have one, this is a good opportunity to get one because they're on sale right now. With the torches, this is a good beginner torch, or if you're traveling or you've got other stuff. The stuff that I make now, I need a bigger torch. So this will work for a lot of things. And I used one for years and years to do my metal work. I use a torch. I actually like the torch for certain things because you have more control. And if you need to turn something off, you just flick your finger off as opposed to having to crank something off. So I do prefer it in some circumstances. So even though there are limitations to this product, there are also some benefits. So just keep that in mind, because I know sometimes people, they want to go and they want to make these like things with like 100 different bezels on it. And that may not, the torch that we're selling on the internet is not necessarily going to be the one that is ideal for that. So all things thrive in optimal conditions. So if you have a torch that gets super hot, you can control the heat. You can change the tip of the torch to so that you can control how much heat is putting out with like the smaller tip, or if you need more, if you're going to do casting, you can get a rosebud tip, and that, depending on what you're doing, you'll need certain things. So the torch, the handheld butane torch, is a really great tool, but it does have limitations. So just keep that in mind, because sometimes people think that they're going to buy one thing and then that's going to be the only thing they'll ever have to buy ever again. And unfortunately, that's not the case, because it will get hot. It will get very, 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 very hot, but it will not get hot enough to do large pieces. And what that means, it's up to the powers that be about how that comes together, what's large and what's too large. Because if you have a cutout, that will decrease the mass that you're heating up. So you may be able to do a bigger piece, but if there's lots of cutouts, then you can go a little bit larger. But if it's a big solid chunk of something, it's going to be smaller. So, anyways, so we're going to put our glasses on. We're going to have our apron on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this around and then we'll get started. All right. So you're going to see the ceiling for a second. All right. So in this, you can see I've put down a cookie sheet. I love cookie sheets because they are super great. You can put stuff in them. What I usually do for cookie sheets is I put a piece of felt down and then I bead in these cookie sheets. And then when I'm done, if I'm not finished, I can stack these up and I can have multiple projects going all at once, and I don't have to really clean up as much. But for today's purposes, we're going to be using an unlined cookie sheet. This is, I believe, the steel cookie sheet. We got it at the Dollar General, and a very inexpensive, very affordable. And this is nice because it has a rim. The rim, if anything falls on this plate, on this cookie sheet, it's not gonna be able to roll on your foot. All right, so keep that in mind. I've got a vessel and I have water in it. It's called a quench pot, and this is what you need to cool the metal down rapidly. This is super duper important that you have a fire resistant quench pot. And one of the reasons why it's super important to have a fire resistant quench pot is because if you have plastic, I used to use plastic, and then one day I messed up, and the water, after I made like hundreds and hundreds of pieces. I didn't make hundreds and hundreds of pieces, but I made a lot of pieces. The water started to boil. And when the water starts to boil, it can kind of mess up the plastic. And also, if you hit it just right and the water is not cold enough to start the cooling cycle, that little heat, that little hot head pin can get down to the bottom of the plastic and melt a hole in the bottom. And then your workstation is flooded with quench water. So just keep in mind, use a glass container, use ceramic. Sometimes you might have to replace the ceramic. Sometimes different things happen and it can cause the glaze on the ceramic to break down, and it can suck up some stuff. So just keep that in mind. If you notice any damp rings underneath your quench pot, that might be why. Some people like to quench directly in the pickle. This is something that I was taught not to do. And also, quenching directly into the pickle pot can be dangerous. For one, you're exposed to more vapors of chemicals and hot vapors of chemicals, which, not ideal. The other thing is that the acid in the pickle can eat away at your metal and cause your metal to become brittle. So when you're doing something like depletion gilding, which is where you take the torch and you anneal your silver, and then you quench it, and you do that over and over until you basically make a thin layer of fine silver on the surface. You want to not quench it in the quench pot because it can cause your silver to get brittle and form cracks. So just keep that in mind. All right. So I've got this. I've got my cookie sheet. I've got this bowl with water in it, and it doesn't matter if it's distilled, whatever. I've also got a little container to hold my metal. Let's prep our metal first before we go into the torch. So one of the reasons why I think it's super handy dandy to know about, and I'm going to start turning off some of the lights so that you can better see some of the torch in a bit, but we're not there yet. So one of the benefits of making your own head pins is that you can decide on how thick your head pins are and how long they are. Sometimes you need a really long head pin and they just don't sell them that long. Sometimes you want to, a head pin that is 16 gauge copper and they don't have a 16 gauge copper head pin. Sometimes you want to make rivets and they don't have the one that the size of the hole that, no, it's not Williams bowl, it's IKEA bowl. I don't like to use handmade stuff for it because I want to keep that. If this IKEA bowl gets messed up, then I just get another one, or go to the thrift store. But I try to take care of my handmade objects. So, but it kind of looks like that because of the copper changing that color. But anyways, so one of the perks of that is that you can use different sizes and you can customize what your head pin is going to be like. Now, when I talk about head pins, sometimes people think about head pins and they think about head pins like this. And these are ones that most people think about. And so what they do is they heat these up and they have a special machine that has a tip that flattens that tip on. And that's how that's made. It's made with a machine. You can make your own, but you have to have a material that is hard enough that it's not going to bend. So if you have a steel, they call it a draw plate, you can make your own head pins by taking that and putting the bulge head pin in the steel draw plate and then smashing the ball flat. So that's more work. And if you want to do that, you can do that. I like a decorative end for my bald head pin. Now, depending on what you use for your metal, it will also determine what the ball of your head pin looks like. So that means that if you use copper, you can actually make different colors on the ball of your head pin. So if you want a rosy glow, and I can demonstrate this, you will quench it immediately. It will it will look like a bright kind of rosy color. It's from the kind of it's a heat patina that's on the tip of it. If you want it to be a dark kind of eggplant color, you let it cool in the air a little bit before you drop in the quench pot, and that will develop a nice kind of eggplant color. Now, if you were wanting to use sterling silver, you're going to have, unfortunately, there's going to be some issues. So when you use sterling silver, sometimes what happens is it kind of balls up, and when it cools, it looks a little bit like a raisin. So if you don't care about that, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Go forth and conquer. If it bothers you that there's texture on the ball, you can file it down, and you can use diamond files, you can use an emery block, but it is more work to get that smoothed off on the edge. You can also use a pumice wheel. If you use a pumice wheel, make sure to use a mask while you're doing that, because that goes into the air and then that goes into your lungs. So just keep that in mind. Other metals like brass and bronze, sometimes they also have pitting that happens. If you use fine silver, you're less likely to have that pitting, but the metal is softer. So it is not ideal for certain construction. If it's for a decorative element or an embellishment, then that's fine. But if you want it to be something that's going to be like holding up a great big heavy bead or whatever, that's not necessarily going to be the best choice. So sometimes it is good to work with the sterling silver because it is a harder metal. It's just more cleanup work while you're later on. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this handy dandy. This is called a double flush cutter. I love these things because it saves on cleanup. For me, I want to do everything that I can to reduce the amount of cleanup that I have to do. If I have a lot of cleanup to do, I'm less likely to do that project. Just being honest, just being truthful, that's just the way. So if I have to like file a bunch of like minutia, tiny things, then I'm not going to do it. And more likely than not, I'm not going to do it. But so if I have this double flush cutter, I can get my wire and cut it. Now, one thing that I want to do when I'm cutting this wire, if I'm making a lot of head pins and I want them to be all the same, then I will cut all of the head pins the same length. What I recommend is cutting two first. So what that means is, you cut one, then you cut another, and then you ball up your head pin, and then depending on how big you want that ball to be on the head pin, then you can after you quench it, you can use the second one that you cut as a pattern to measure out and cut, because sometimes you want a small ball on your head, so you're going to use less wire, which means that you're going to have a more length of your head pin. If you want a bigger ball, then that will require more metal and you'll have a shorter head pin. So it doesn't make sense to make a great big long head pin that's got a long wire and then having to trim all of that off. At least in my mind, it doesn't make sense to do that. So I like to make a little template for myself and then figure out what I need. If you don't care and you just want to make head pins, that's fine. That this is just a little trick so that if you're making a bunch and you want them all to be the same size, that's how you do it. So I'm just going to cut off some of this. This is the 22 gauge. And I'm precisely eyeballing it. And I don't want to use a bunch of kinky wire or wire that has a bunch of cuts and nicks in it. That's my own particular kind of thing. I don't like to have to do a lot of cleanup to my pieces, so that's one of the reasons why. All right, so I cut some, and then I'm going to put them in my little container. This one might be a little bit too tall. Let me get a different container that's a little bit more shallow. Let's see about this. All right, and the reason why I'm putting them in like a cup is that when I'm working, then I'm going to be using these tweezers. I've got this steel tweezer with a wooden panel. It's called a scale, a wooden scale. And you want to use one like this. You can use regular pliers. However, I have seen this so many times. People will use pliers and they dunk the pliers in the water. What happens is that water will get into the steel and very rapidly cause that box joint where your pliers are to rust. And it can make pliers, and sometimes very expensive pliers, almost useless overnight. And you can clean that rust off and you can clean and do all this other stuff. But in all likelihood, once you start to get going, then it's a constant maintenance job. So these tweezers, these steel tweezers with a wooden scale, they're very inexpensive, and you can dip this in water all day long and it's not going to affect it. Now, one thing I also want to point out is the wood. The wood is good to have on these because if you're making a lot of stuff, the steel can heat up and the steel can burn your hands. So these little wooden scales help prevent it. In a lot of cases, it's not going to matter too much because your torch is, you have to run your torch a lot to get it to do that, to heat up this. But metal is conductive of heat. It's one of the properties of metal that makes it metal. It conducts heat. It conducts electricity. It's one of the properties of metal. So just keep that in mind. So I've got my scale, my tweezers. The reason why I have these in this little cup is because when you're going to like pick stuff up, it becomes like a game of pickup sticks and or operation, and then you're kind of struggling around and you got the torch going. It does not bode well for a productive efficiency. So having these stood up is good. You can put this in a ball of clay, whatever you want to have it stand up. But having it in like a cup is an easy way so that they're vertical or semi-vertical, and you can then just pick it up and go, as opposed to having to like fish around and stop and start and stop and start. All right. In theory, that would be more ideal if it was a non-flammable material, but that's what I've got right now within arm's reach without having to play seek and find. So that's what I'm going to use for the demo. But generally speaking, you're going to want a non-flammable material, and one that's not going to fall over. Now, the next thing after I cut off a couple pieces of this off camera just now. And that's a 16 gauge copper. And I just did that off camera because it's a little bit easier sometimes when you can do that closer to your body. All right, so we've got our cookie sheet, our quench bowl, something to hold our head pins, before they're head pins, I should say, to hold the wire that will become head pins. We've got our tweezers with the wood scales. We have a torch. Now, if you're traveling, it is illegal to travel with a full torch. I don't know who's going to check up on you, but it is dangerous when you are, say, in the air, or if you're sending somebody a torch, whatever, go outside, click this, and bleed the line. All right. So this torch is kind of like the torch that we saw online, but it's slightly different. This one is a very old model. And they've made some adjustments. So mine is a locking torch. So it's this is the safety right here. This is the gas. When you do it, when you hold that in, the gas will flow. Or that's igniter. So I pull that in and then click that, and then it starts. So this, on this side, it adjusts it's a lock. So that's the lock. If you have hand fatigue and you can't use your torch because it hurts your hand to hold this in while it goes, then you can turn the lock on. I don't like to use this. If I can use this, if I don't have to use this, then that's good. Because if I have to use this, then I feel like I don't have as much control. Some people, they put that lock on and they just go to town with it. I also feel like it can waste fuel that way. So it's up to you whether you use a lock or not. I rarely use it, and if I do use it, it's usually because I'm using a larger piece, in which case I just move up to a larger torch if that's the case. Now this controls some of the openings for the oxygen. So if you're having problems with your flame, you can adjust this and it will change kind of the holes, and then the size of the holes, and you can change the size of that. Now this is for that regulates the amount of fuel that goes into your torch. So if you have this put relatively low, then your flame is going to be smaller. If you jack this up to the plus sign, all the way up to the plus sign, it's going to be a bigger flame. So this controls the amount of oxygen that mixes with the butane, which can control the size of the bushiness of the flame and how hot the flame is, and this controls the size of the flame. I hardly ever mess with this one, and I hardly ever mess with the lock. And once I have my flame kind of dialed into where I want it to be, then I don't really mess around with that either. Some people, they just fiddle with stuff and they just like fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. It's like those people who, when they go into the car, they start messing with all of the AC settings and this and that. I'm not one of those people. I set it, and then that's pretty much that until I exit the car years later. So like William, when we're driving, he's always like adjusting all of the controls and stuff for the air conditioner. I don't do that. But that's everybody's different. So if you're one of those fiddlers, just know, and I would recommend, if you do get one of these, before you start working on anything that's super expensive or precious heirloom, experiment and play with it before you jump into like the most serious project you're ever going to make in your life. There is a lot of things that you can do with this torch, not just making bald head pins. You can solder with it. And when I'm talking about solder, I'm talking about torch soldering, not soft soldering with an iron. You can solder with it. You can braze with it. You can create a fire patina on metal with it. There's a lot of things that you can do with this very simple tool. You can remove air bubbles from resin. There's a lot of different things you can do with this tool. So if you're putting together a studio to do metalworking, a torch is definitely a good investment. And this is a good entry way into working your way up to a larger torch. I know sometimes people are a little intimidated by the larger torches. There's a lot of horror stories out there about places catching on fire and different things. That what you have to do is you have to be mindful of maintaining and regulating your fuel sources and making sure that they're installed in a way that they are done so with safety. Now, one of the other things that I did not mention yet, because I haven't talked about fire just quite yet, is a fire extinguisher. We have a fire extinguisher right here. And it is within arm's reach of my area. So if I need it, I don't have to play seek and find. I know exactly where it is. And yes, I can do it. Now, another thing is when I'm working with hot stuff like this, because you have the cookie sheet means it's portable, does not necessarily mean that you should just do it anywhere. If you got grandma's table and it's the heirloom piece, maybe pick a different surface because um, even in the best situation or in the, even in the best situation, stuff can happen and you can accidentally burn or scorch your table. And I would feel terrible about doing that. So just keep that in mind. Work in a surface that's non-flammable. You're not going to be working on carpet. If there is carpet, that you put something down as kind of like a barrier just in case. So, and you can go, this is a very minimal kind of safety instruction, but you can go like really hardcore and like only work in a concrete room and only work on a steel table and only do this and only do that. I'm more practical in knowing that sometimes, you don't always have the option of doing that. So sometimes you have to work within your constraints. Now, going back to the torch, I'm going to try not to dunk this into the water. This little thing comes off. I leave this on because I don't ever want this to disappear because it's so handy. It keeps the torch. It's a foot for the torch. It keeps it so it doesn't fall over. If it falls over and this torch is hot, it can catch stuff on fire. So just keep that in mind. I have this so it doesn't fall over. Now there's a valve right here at the bottom, this little gold brass valve. That's where you put the fuel in. The fuel comes like this. This is Zippo brand. It's made right here, bottled in Bradford, Pennsylvania. So it's a local-ish company. And you want to get the best possible fuel that you can afford. One of the reasons why is that if you get some cheapy deepy off-brand, somebody saw it out the back of their truck and you don't know how old it is, how whatever, it can either be weak for one, or number two, it can also be super dirty and have lots of contaminants in it and be not so great. So we just go to fill up this torch. We just go, either there's a smoke shop that sells cigarettes and stuff. We can buy it there. We can buy it at a Walmart. You can order it online, but you just have to make sure that you're ordering from a place that's going to be reputable in shipping stuff. All right. So generally speaking, there's these little rings around it, and if you have an unusual shaped nozzle, or your valve for your torch, then you can do whatever use whatever nozzle change that there is. Generally speaking, I just use the one that's on there. I don't mess around too much with adjusting that. All right. So you're holding your torch upside down. Your gas is not on. This is not locked in place. This is not going. If it is going, you can hear a hiss. You invert this. You put this into the nozzle like so. I don't know if I can get the angle just right so you can see it. But then you go for a couple of seconds, and then it's full because it will start spitting at the top. That's because there's no more room for fuel, and it starts spitting out the top. When you see that, release this so that you're not putting fuel in the air, and then number two, so you're not wasting fuel. Another thing that will happen is this cylinder that you're holding will get colder to the touch. All right, so let me just put this over there, put it on top. See, this one, it was bled pretty much dry. And then, so I'm going to try it again. Yep, see, it's full up. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to get this cap, this red cap, put that back on there so that doesn't accidentally get bent down. I'm going to turn this over and set this on the side so that I can let the gas kind of settle into place. All right. While I'm letting the gas settle into place, I'm going to cut some more head pins. Just because I'm going to let it settle for a minute or two. All right. And I know this is probably like super basic for a lot of people who have used a torch before, especially these handheld torches. I'm going really extreme into the details. Generally speaking, when I'm doing this regular, I don't think about like half of this stuff. I just have all the systems in place in case I need it. So there you go. Now, if you're if you use one of these torches and the self-igniter wears out, you can always keep a lighter off to the side, or there's a thing called a striker, and a striker is used to light a regular torch, and you can use that to light your torch as well, because sometimes this ignition will wear out over time. The flint and the steel that's inside of it can kind of wear out. So it doesn't mean that the torch is useless. It just means that you need to have a striker next to you or a lighter. And sometimes you can even use a lighter that is out of fuel, and you just use that little striker that's on there. All right. But once you have this butane, then you can always add fuel to your lighters. At least the better non-disposable ones, I know you can add more fuel to, which I'm actually going to do that right now. Or maybe not. I was like, well, I'm just going to add the fuel to this. But I guess I'm not going to do that. And that's fine. Anyways, I had one that you could add fuel to it, but this looks like it's not that one. All right, so that's probably enough time for this to settle down. At this point, I'm going to start turning off some lights. And the reason why is we're going to start talking about the anatomy of the flame. All right, so when this flame shoots out, I'm not going to touch the fire, obviously, because I don't want to burn myself. It makes a cone, all right? So at the end of this torch, there's a cone. A lot of people who have never used a torch, they will put the metal or whatever close to the tip of the torch, the metal torch, because in their mind, they think that it's hotter. It is not the hottest part of the flame. So there is a cone, and there's a cone within the cone, and there's a blue flame that makes that cone. The very tip of that blue flame is going to be the hottest part of your flame. That does not mean that the invisible part of the cone is not hot. That is also hot, but it is not the hottest part. The hottest part is that little tippy tip of the blue flame. So that is your target area for what you're going to have for your heat of your, when we're melting stuff, we want it to be in the hottest part so that we're not here all day. Now I'm going to do a dry run before we get down to work. So when I was taught to make head pins, I was taught to hold this perpendicular up and down. You hold it over the water or the quench pot, and you hold it like so. All right. And it will work. However, we all got stuff to do, and it takes longer. It takes a long time sometimes. And when you're working with a heavier gauge wire, it takes a really long time and you're wasting fuel. So what I do is I turn this at an angle so that it is parallel with my torch. And what that does is then the heat focuses on that one little dot of metal on the end and you can heat it up. If you leave it like this, what's going to happen is it's going to slump to the side and form kind of like a side. It's like when you're like dipping honey, it will all kind of form a little ball on the tip of your whatever you're dipping the honey, and it will be off to one side. That's not an ideal head pin. An ideal head pin is when the ball is at the very tip of the wire and it's not hanging off to the side. It's just in the middle of that. So what I do is when I've got this heated up to the size I want, I turn it up and let it rest there for maybe half a second or so and let it cool a little bit and then drop it into the quench pot. All right? So that's how I do it. I hold it like this until it gets nice and hot, and then I turn it up and then release it once it is. Once I get this going, it's a super fast process. But I just like to explain it while I'm not having the torch because then that way, when it's just a easier, more clear. I can talk as long as I want about something. I don't have to feel rushed about with the fire and all this other stuff. So we do the dry walkthrough and then we do the actual balling up. All right. So I'm going to click this open. See how quick that is? This actually can be set a little bit lower. This is the thicker wire. Now, you'll also see where that one, you have to be careful also because this is expelling fuel and it's almost like a hair dryer. It's blowing hot air. So if you just hang out there, you can blow the ball off of the tip of your wire or it can splatter hot air. The hot air can splatter the hot metal and like it can spit. So just keep that in mind. Let me see if I can turn off all the lights and then you can see it a little bit better. All right. When I was in that Mocha Magane class, he likes to see the annealing when it's completely pitch black. And so some of the people were coming in and they're like, why are all the lights turned off? And that's why. So you can see the metal a little bit clearer. All right. So and because this is a little bit thicker gauge, this is a 16 gauge. If I let this kind of air cool first until it's black, and then I drop it, it will. And it's a good idea to every once in a while, if your torch is hitting the tips of your tweezers, to dunk them in the water, and that also cools them. But this is the one we just made, and it's kind of an eggplant color. If you want this to be copper and you don't want this, you can put this in the pickle pot. One thing that I do, I just pull on these. because sometimes it can be a weak kind of bond. So you just want to pull on that. And if it comes off, then you just make it, you can do it over. But it's more frustrating when you string everything up and then you go to wrap it and then it just like pops off. So sometimes they'll do that. And then this is what it looks like when it's quenched right away. See that? It's got that kind of rosy color. And that finish is actually really sturdy. Um, so that's just the color of the copper in the oxidation with the fire. So let me show you again. I'm just gonna, how about this? I'm going to just finish up these ones. Let me put this down a little bit lower. All right. So I'm just gonna make some head pins, and then y'all can see. Now, it also, if you turn your thing to the side, it's not gonna light. So you can light it. This is pickle is something separate. So pickle is like there are all different kinds. There's a pickle is water and this product called Scalex. It's basically the stuff that they use to clean a pool, but you can also use a citric pickle if you're more like worried about chemicals. Normally that's in a crock pot, and the crock pot is turned on and then it eats away any oxidation. And also, if you want the ball to be bigger, you kind of so when you heat metal up, it becomes liquid, it becomes molten. And the characteristics of liquids is usually it will want to ball up on itself unless something disrupts that I can't remember the exact word. It's like hydroscopic or something. But unless you have something that disrupts that, it will want to ball up on itself. So it may fall off if you hold it too long in the flame and you don't adjust it. So if you have it lower than that tip, it may ball up, but then if your flame is too high, it can create a sever and the ball on the head pin can fall off. So we don't want that to happen. And this becomes kind of a workout for your hand if you're not used to. See, that fell off. And say you have one that's kind of lopsided, you can always put it back in the fire and then heat it up again and it all. And if it's going too fast, the way I showed you, you can always hold it further back and it will also work. Because the way that I showed it with holding it kind of at the same length or same level, like I showed it like this, if you want it to be slower, especially with finer wires, go further away from the hottest part of the flame, and that will also slow down how quickly the metal moves. Because I'm kind of want it to be fast, so for me, all right, so that's how you do that. Does anybody have any questions? This is also how you can granulate metal. I don't recommend doing it this way. Usually I'll do it like on a charcoal block, but that's one way that you can make granulation. But like sometimes people will heat up the metal and then run it through a sieve and then put that over the water, and that's how some people make granulation. Granules. All right, so I'll turn the lights back on and we'll see if there's any more questions. Once we have the light on, you can kind of see. I'll show you. And really, I could dig my fingers in here. I'm kind of being delicate with these tweezers, but in reality, you don't necessarily have to be. Once I'm done with the tweezers, I wipe them off. I carry around a wad of paper towels with me. They're not snot rags. And then, yeah, so I'm going to turn the light on, and then we're going to look at our yield. All right. Michelle said that was interesting. Well, thanks. So that's how these bald head pins are made. And if you have one that you don't like, I mean, you can make so many of them in a relatively short amount of time that it doesn't actually matter. You know, you can just make more. So I like them. They kind of have that kind of, I love the kind of ones that are that pinkish color. Those are my favorite. I used to, before I had a torch, I used to pay somebody to make these for me because I didn't know how to make them. And I was like, I love these rosy head pins. And all it is, I mean, I could have, you know, but I was living in an apartment in New York and I was so scared of fire and stuff. And so I didn't make my own head pins for a really long time. And when I found out how easy it was, I thought about how much money I'd spent on these little head pins. Now, I mean, you know, it's a good way to support somebody else, but you know, it's easier when you can do it yourself. So they do have a little bit. Some of them have a little bit of pitting, but for the most part, they're pretty good. If you are worried about that, I mean, you know, I don't know what to tell you. You can file it off or whatever. Now, one of the things that I do sometimes, and I've done this before, and I can't find that thing of nail polish, is nail polish is basically like a liquid enamel. And it comes in so many different colors and finishes. You can always take some of these head pins and paint them with nail polish and make sure they're completely dry. And if you want them to be even super more sturdy, you can put a coat of UV resin over the nail polish and then put that in the UV machine. You can put a little piece of clay there so that it doesn't like drip, you know, or you can put them make yourself a little jig so that if it does drip, it doesn't drip to one side. Normally when I coat with UV, it's just a really like, you know, just wiping it on. So it's not like gunked on. So if you don't like these colors, you can add color to your design by using a little bit of nail polish. You can also use an embossing gun to do this as well. So, or to add color. So what you would do is take your head pin, put it in an adhesive. Like there's a stuff called Recollections. It's like a scrapbooking thing. This is the clear ink or the transparent. It's basically the sticky. You dip this into the sticky. You take your embossing powder and you dip it in the embossing powder. You tap off the excess and then using some tweezers, you hold it in place and then you take your heat gun and you put the heat gun on, and then that powder will fuse to the surface. And I can do that really quick if I can find my heat gun. Let me look for my heat gun real fast. All right, now let me see if I have a plug that can accommodate this free plug. Yes, so I've got that. Now these get super hot, so just be careful. I've seen people, they're more apt to burn themselves on the heat gun than they are the torch, because the torch or the heat gun is kind of like it looks kind of like a hair dryer. And so people kind of forget that it's actually a tool that can be very, very hot. All right. So I just took that head pin that we just made. I put some adhesive on it, and I'm going to use the tweezers to hold it, and then I'm going to turn the tweezers. I'm going to put this out of the way. I'm just heating this embossing powder up. If it starts to bubble or boil, just take the heat off of it for a second. And I kind of spin it around so that it gets an even adhesion all the way around. If you see any granules, that means it's not melted yet. And then you can let this cool. I'm putting that. And then let me test it and see. I dunked this in the quench pot. And then, yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, this is a weird color. I mean, black on black was not the most dramatic of reveals. You know, it's not like, oh my gosh, it's green now. But I probably could have let it heated this up a little bit longer. And if you want, you can let this air cool too. You can make yourself a little rack with like a big nail or something, and then let it air cool as opposed to dunking it in the water. But just as long as it's not touching the surface, like if you have the plastic and it cools on a flat surface, it's going to make a flat spot. So let me try another color. So that's a little bit more exciting. Let me try one of these pink ones. I like these pink ones just the way they are, but I don't want to, I want to try test it out. I like the pad because you don't get like a super excess of adhesive. Sometimes if you're using like a like a bottle of adhesive, you can get too much of adhesive on, and that can kind of sometimes be kind of gross. And then so I'm just going to take this, and there's a little bit of a booger on that. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to hope that it comes off with the heat. All right, so there you go. So I'm just going to let that cool. And then I'm going to have a silver tipped head pin. But again, this is a good thing if you have colors and stuff and you want to have like a really colorful head pin, you can have it that way. And this one, I kind of, I let it puddle to one side. So it's got that kind of that pink of the copper showing through. And then on one side, it's all balled up. And I think that that's pretty fun. I left the heat on it a little bit longer than I should have. But I think that's a really fun way if you want to have, Michelle says, is that how they make multiple color head pins and jump rings? Maybe. This is one of the ways that I do it, but I don't know about other people. But usually they have more of an industrial process, but this is how I do it. And you can also put like the nail polish on and stuff. And if you're worried about it coming off, you can always put a UV coating on top of it. I kind of think that this is basically plastic. The embossing powder is basically fine particle plastic. So I'm not like super concerned about it, but you know, you may have more concerns than me. And you can also, if you need to, you can always dip it again. And if it's still got adhesive on it, you can use that and do multiple dips if you want the color to be really saturated or whatever. I'm gonna try not to overdo it, because if you overdo it, sometimes if it's a metallic, you lose the metallic quality of those. So there you go. So I hope you all enjoyed that. If you have any other requests for different tutorials, let me know. You can always email us at info@allegorygallery.com. That's a good way to do it, because sometimes people will leave a comment, and that's a really kind of interesting, it's immediate, but sometimes I forget. So um, if you email us, that's probably the best place. And yeah, so that's how we made head pins today. I can't remember who asked for the head pins, but there you go. All right. I hope you all had fun tonight. I thought this would be super quick, but it ended up being about an hour and a half. I see a couple of people saying things. Beating with Nicole B. She said, nice. Michelle said, thank you, Andrew. Norma says, thanks, Andrew. Julie says, can't wait to try it. Oh, good. If you do try it, let us know. Post the pictures in the Allegory Gallery Design Challenge group. We always love to see what people are up to. Beating with Nicole says, I got an email that my order is being processed. I can't wait to get my order. Yay. Oh, goody. I'm glad that, is coming through. A lot of our process now, with us using Shopify as our host for our online shopping, a lot of that, if you put your information in, it gives you blow by blow details about when things are processed, when things are put in the mail, when things. I'm on one thing called I buy a lot of my books on Thrift Books, and they tell you basically. I know what the mailman had for lunch. They go into a ton of detail, but yeah, so a lot of our process with Shopify is kind of like that. So if people have questions, they're like, where's my order? There's tracking and all kinds of stuff. And sometimes it's like, there's glitches or things like that. But for the most part, it's pretty reliable. So we really love Shopify because they kind of take some of the stuff about keeping the order status of stuff for customers, that people know where their stuff is. So that's always handy. Speaking of the online store, there's currently a sale for 25% off in the online store. So if people want to take advantage of that, head on over to our main Facebook page. The coupon code's there. If you get our newsletter, the newsletter's there. If you are on our SMS list, I'm sure William sent out one to let people know. Please take advantage of it. I kind of have hopes that I'm going to make a lot of money this week, and then I'm going to magically get into that one class at Touchstone, because I really, really want to learn how to do joints and hinges. And as I took classes for some of the things I know, like with sawing and stuff, I took a class. I took an online class with Thomas Mann, and I took a sawing class with Stacy Rogers, who was the president of Snag. But things like hinges are so specific, and I haven't done that yet. So I would love to do an in-person class, because I tried to do it on my own and I kind of messed it up. So I kind of feel like you have to have in-person instruction on that to get like the weight of the metal down and kind of be able to see and feel how things come together as opposed to just like instruction online. But anyways, Beaten with Nicole said, I want to set up a Shopify store, but I'm so nervous about it. Don't know why. I would just do it. It's relatively cheap or inexpensive, and it makes it's so much nicer. If you don't have a lot of products and you don't want to have the output paying for something and not knowing, you can always try Big Cartel. When we had just opened our online store, we used Big Cartel, and they have I think at the end they had 1,000 product cap. But we have thousands of products on our online store. It doesn't seem like it, but we have thousands of products on our online store. So when I first used Big Cartel, there was like 100 product limit. But anyways, so that's a good place to get your feet wet if you're thinking about starting an online store and you don't want to spend a lot of money. Michelle says, your piece is so beautiful. Thanks. Which piece? This? Oh, it's a head pin. But yeah, so thanks. And yeah, so I don't know if I'm back tomorrow. William, I have to see if he's in his class tomorrow. If not, then we'll have another hangout session with me. I can talk to William when he gets home tonight, and we can talk about what we're going to do for tomorrow. Because if he's in class tomorrow, then I'll do probably another tutorial, or maybe I'll dig through some lots because I want to clean the studio or start working on the studio some more. All right. Well, Michelle says no. Which piece is it? I don't know what piece. I make a lot of stuff. Oh, she says your new one, the one you went to learn for. So yeah, I'm gonna cut that up and turn it into other stuff. So it'll turn into more things, hopefully. But yeah, so I don't know what I'm gonna make with it yet. I was thinking of doing one of my portrait brooches, but I kind of want to make something that'll be something that other people will probably maybe want to buy. So I can recoup some of my costs on like the Airbnb and like travel and stuff. But yeah, we'll see. All right. Enough of that. I hope you all had fun and had a good time and learned how to make bald head pins. If you came in later and you're curious about it, you can watch it on the replay. I go painfully step by step from safety to all different kinds of things to do. And this is pretty a low tech setup. So I know sometimes people are afraid of, they're afraid of having like a lot of equipment, or they live in a small space, or there's a lot of different reasons why people get intimidated by doing metal smithing. And this little cookie sheet business is really low tech, really inexpensive stuff that you have in your pantry, or not pantry, but in your cupboards. You can use, like, I would not recommend maybe mix and matching. But say you have a cookie sheet that's seen better days, you can always use that cookie sheet. I've been to yard sales where they sell cookie sheets for like 25 cents, or they just give them away because they look crusty. Those are great. It's a fireproof surface. If you're also worried about this being too light and kind of jiggling, you can put a ceramic tile in the base of it, and that will also help keep the weight down. So if you're outside and you're worried about the wind blowing or something, you can put a ceramic tile on the base of it. I use ceramic tiles all the time when I'm working, whether it's polymer clay or my metalwork or whatever. I use them quite frequently. They're very inexpensive. They're from Home Depot or Lowe's. Sometimes if you have a renovation project and you've got leftovers, you can use those as well. Those are really wonderful because they're very portable and you can put them in the oven and you can do things, you can preheat things in the oven with it. It's very versatile. Marcy says, dang, thought I caught you live. We'll watch replay. Hello, Andrew. Enjoying yours and William's postings lately. We are live, but we're done. Pretty much we're done. Teresa says joining in. And she said, I got the Sari Silk package and your pretty print of the hand. Oh, good. And June says, thank you. Marcy says, I use terracotta ceramic tiles in the oven for bread and under piece oven. Yeah, those are really good for that. It makes a nice crispy crust. I would not use anything that you're using for your metal smithing or crafts for your food also. That's just me being paranoid. I'm sure that there's like some tolerance of how much, we probably get a lot of microplastics in our system anyway, just by living in the world that we live in. But I would not recommend it because then, who knows what can happen. But if you got one of those Pampered Chef ones, I'm going to whoop your butt if you use that for metal smithing because those are expensive. Go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get that 30-cent ceramic tile and use that. Don't be using that $60 Pampered Chef pizza crust pie plate thing because, like I said, you're not going to be able to use that for the pizza anymore. All right. So thanks so much. Hope you learned stuff and had a good time. And I will see you all maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday. I don't know what the schedule is for William and his classes. So we'll check. All right. Have a good night, everybody. See ya.